The State Patrol had this case. Somebody picked it up and put it on Reddit. At one point, a Maryland State Vehicle inspector said, I think you're looking for a mid-1980s Chevrolet truck.
What happens when the internet decides to get involved in unsolved mysteries? From cold cases to strange disappearances, today we're going to uncover 10 creepy cases that were finally solved by the internet. Are you ready for some spine-chilling revelations? Let's find out. Disappearance of Susan Rainwater. A quiet morning in Eatonville, Washington. Susan Rainwater, a 63-year-old woman, starts her day like always, waking her husband with a kiss and a cup of coffee. Her daughter remembers how Susan never missed a chance to say, "I love you." On August 9, 2018, Susan told her husband she was going for a quick bike ride and would be back in about 30 minutes. But this time, she didn't return. Her husband grew worried and got into his car to search for her. His worst fear came true when he saw something by the side of the road, Susan's bike. Nearby, he found her lying on the ground. She was gone. Heartbroken, he called for help. The Washington State Patrol arrived and quickly determined that Susan had been hit by a car, but the driver had fled. The only clue left behind was a black piece of plastic from the vehicle. Investigators shared a photo of it on Twitter, asking if anyone could identify the make and model of the car. It was a long shot, but they had no other leads. To their surprise, the internet came through. A Reddit user reposted the photo to the "What is this thing?" subreddit, and soon after, a vehicle inspector named Jeff's Nuts responded. He recognized the plastic piece as belonging to a late 1980s Chevrolet CK pickup truck. To prove it, he shared a photo of the same part from his own vehicle. This new information led investigators to surveillance footage from the area, which helped them identify Jeremy Simon, the owner of a matching truck. When they examined his vehicle, it was missing the exact piece found at the scene. Simon was arrested and confessed. He admitted that on the morning of the crash, he had fallen asleep at the wheel while driving home after a long shift as a carpenter. At first, he thought he had hit a mailbox, but when he saw a bicycle in his rearview mirror, he panicked and fled. He said he never intended to hurt anyone and was trying to address his substance abuse issues. Simon was charged with vehicular manslaughter, leaving the scene of a fatal accident and possession of a controlled substance. He was sentenced to 53 months in prison, but would serve only half of it under a drug offender program. Susan's family was deeply upset with the sentence, but found some relief knowing the person responsible was caught. During the trial, Susan's daughter looked at Simon and said, "Do better, live a better life." Dorothy. How do you unlock the final thoughts of someone who's no longer here to explain them? What if the answer lay hidden in a string of mysterious letters, waiting for someone to crack the code? In 1996, Dorothy Holm, a loving grandmother from Minnesota, passed away after battling a brain tumor. In her final weeks, as the tumor robbed her of speech, Dorothy relied on index cards to write her thoughts and communicate with her family. Among these heartfelt notes, her children found one card that stood out, a baffling sequence of seemingly random letters and symbols. At first glance, it looked like nonsense: backward commas, unexplained breaks, and no recognizable words. What did it mean? Dorothy's granddaughter Jana and her cousins were too young to decipher it at the time, but spent years trying as they grew older. Despite their best efforts, the code remained unbroken, leaving the family with a mystery that lingered for nearly 20 years. Years later, Jana stumbled across the card again and was determined to solve it. What if the answer had been there all along, just waiting for the right person to see it? She posted the puzzle to the online community Metafilter, sharing details about Dorothy's life, her devout faith, and the strange code. To Jana's astonishment, it took the internet only 13 minutes to crack the mystery. One user noticed the pattern in the letters OFWA, IHHBTN. They asked a simple question: was Dorothy religious? When Jana confirmed she was, the pieces fell into place. The letters were the opening words of the Lord's Prayer: "Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name." Dorothy, even in her final days, had written this as a way to hold on to her faith, using the card as a personal reminder. For nearly 2 decades, the family had searched for an explanation, imagining all sorts of possibilities. The answer, when it came, was profoundly simple and deeply moving. Dorothy's mysterious card wasn't a code to be cracked, it was a message of faith and devotion, a reflection of her unshakable spirit. Gang violence. A quiet California neighborhood, a family going about their day when suddenly everything changes. What led to Crystal Theobald's tragic death? How could a loving daughter and sister become the victim of mistaken identity? And how far would her mother go to bring her killers to justice? Crystal lived in Arlanza, California, with her family. In February 2006, her brother Robert drove away from their home in his light-colored SUV. What should have been an ordinary drive turned into a nightmare. Why was he being followed? A white Ford Expedition appeared, trailing him closely. When Robert sped up, so did the SUV. A high-speed chase unfolded, and though Robert eventually escaped, the danger wasn't over. Did Robert know who these people were? No. He didn't recognize them and wasn't about to stick around to find out. He made it to his daughter's mother's house and thought he was safe. But was the white expedition gone? Not even close. It was still circling the area when Crystal arrived at an intersection in her SUV, with her boyfriend and brother Justin in the car. Her mother, Belinda, was following in another vehicle. What happened next was unthinkable. A man stepped out of the white expedition, walked up to Crystal's car and opened fire. Crystal was fatally struck, and her boyfriend was injured. Her mother, watching helplessly, could do nothing to stop the attack. The shooter fled, leaving the family shattered. Investigators soon uncovered a chilling motive. The gang responsible, known as the 5150s, had been searching for someone they believed was involved in an earlier attack on them. They mistook Robert's SUV and later Crystal's for the target vehicle. How could Belinda seek justice for her daughter? Fueled by grief and determination, she took matters into her own hands. With her niece Jamie's help, Belinda created 2 fake MySpace profiles, using Crystal's photo on one. Could this really work? Surprisingly, yes. Soon they connected with William Jokes E. Sotelo, a member of the 5150s. In their conversations, Sotelo admitted he was the driver of the White Expedition. She handed it over to investigators who brought Sotelo in for questioning. He revealed the name of the shooter, Julio Heredia. But the case wasn't over. After being released, Sotelo fled to Mexico, vanishing for nearly a decade. Who else was involved? 2 brothers, William and Manuel Lemos, were also in the vehicle during the attack. They later testified against Heredia, who was convicted and sentenced to life in prison without parole, with additional decades added. Eventually, Belinda received an anonymous tip about Sotelo's whereabouts, leading to his capture. He was sentenced to 22 years in prison. The Lemos brothers avoided charges due to their cooperation. Disappearance of Linda Pagano. What if a family argument led to a disappearance that would haunt a brother for over 40 years? Could an internet sleuth really solve a case that baffled investigators for decades? This is the story of Linda Pagano, a mystery that began in 1974 and seemed destined to remain unsolved. Linda Pagano, a 17-year-old from Akron, Ohio, disappeared under troubling circumstances. On September 1, 1974, after attending a concert, Linda came home later than expected. An argument with her stepfather followed, and in a moment of anger, he told her to leave the house. Linda did just that, but she never came back. What happened to Linda after she walked out that door? Her stepfather claimed she left on foot, but he didn't know where she planned to go. Her brother Michael had a sinking feeling from the start. He and other family members suspected foul play, even pointing fingers at her stepfather. But without evidence, the case quickly went cold. Did anyone see Linda that night? No witnesses came forward, and no clues turned up in the searches. Her mother passed away without answers, and when her stepfather died in 1990, he took any secrets he might have had to the grave. Michael feared he would never know what happened to his sister. But in 2016, everything changed. How could a case this old gain new life? Enter an internet sleuth with the username CallMice. While browsing cemetery records, she stumbled across something strange. Details about a woman known as Strongsville Jane Doe, whose remains had been found decades earlier. Strongsville Jane Doe was discovered on February 5, 1975, just 5 months after Linda's disappearance. 3 boys had come across skeletal remains near the Rocky River in Strongsville, Ohio. investigators determined the remains belonged to a young woman in her late teens or early 20s and that she had been killed with a firearm. But no one knew who she was, and the case went cold. Could this unknown woman be Linda? Call Mice dug deeper. She found the autopsy report and a photo of the remains, which had been used to create a facial reconstruction. These details were added to the NAMUS database, catching the attention of the Akron Police Department. What happened next? In 2016, police noticed striking similarities between Strongsville Jane Doe and Linda's case. The remains were exhumed and sent for DNA testing. The results were astonishing. Strongsville Jane Doe was Linda Pagano. For over 40 years, Linda's family had been searching for answers. Michael was overwhelmed by the news. Who was the stranger behind this discovery? He later met Cool Mice, whose real name is Christina Skates, and personally thanked her for solving the mystery that had consumed his family for decades. Mike Pintar. Could a tweet really lead to the truth behind a tragic New Year's Day murder? On January 1, 2012, 24-year-old Mike Pintar had been celebrating the arrival of the new year with friends at the Liberty Grand Banquet Hall in Toronto, Canada. But sometime after the festivities, Mike got separated from his group. By 3 a.m., a passerby found him near Liberty Street, injured and alone. What had happened in those lost hours? Mike had been attacked with a blade. Though rushed to the hospital, he sadly didn't survive. His death turned the investigation into a homicide case, leaving the police to piece together what went wrong that night. Footage from the scene gave investigators their first lead: a man captured on video, considered a person of interest. They released images to the public, describing him as a Caucasian male in his mid-20s, standing between 5 feet 6 inches and 5 feet 7, with short hair and a slim build. But weeks passed and no one came forward. Was this the end of the road for the investigation? It seemed that way until Detective Staff Sergeant Terry Walk decided to take a bold new approach. Inspired by the true crime podcast serial, Walk began using Twitter to engage the public. Would the internet solve what investigators couldn't? Detective Walk started posting photos and details from the case. First came an image of a woman seen with the person of interest. A week later, he shared pictures of items found at the scene: a hair extension with biological material, a pair of black high-heeled shoes, and a keychain featuring the Moroccan flag. Each Saturday brought more clues, turning the case into a real-life mystery that gripped social media users. Tips and theories poured in, and finally a breakthrough emerged. Though police never revealed which tweet cracked the case, investigators identified him as 30-year-old Shah Poirier. He was arrested and charged with second-degree murder, but his story took an unexpected turn. Poirier claimed self-defense. He said he and his girlfriend, Sasha Harton, the woman from the photos, had been bar-hopping that night. While stopping on a street corner, Mike allegedly confronted them, shouting and eventually throwing Poirier to the ground. Fearing for his safety, Poirier grabbed a blade from Harton's purse and fought back, injuring Mike. Why didn't Poirier report what happened? He admitted he had a criminal record and panicked, fearing the consequences. Mike had walked away from the fight, but the injuries proved fatal. In court, Poirier initially faced a second-degree murder charge, but the trial ended in a mistrial. A new trial was scheduled, and this time he pleaded guilty to the lesser charge of manslaughter. He was sentenced to 4 years, 4 months, and 10 days. However, having already spent time in custody, he served just 1 more day in jail. Tammy Joe Alexander. How does a runaway teenager from Florida end up as an unidentified victim in New York? And how does an online community piece together the puzzle decades later? This is the haunting case of Tammy Joe Alexander, solved with the help of internet sleuths. Tammy grew up in a turbulent home in Brooksville, Florida. Her mother, battling a prescription drug addiction, often had violent outbursts. Seeking refuge, Tammy moved in with her grandmother, but returned to live with her mother during her teenage years. Life at home was difficult, and Tammy developed a habit of running away. She was known to hitchhike, sometimes traveling as far as California, but she always contacted her family, who would send her airline tickets to return home. But in 1979, Tammy ran away again, and this time she never came back. Her family, accustomed to her temporary disappearances, didn't immediately suspect the worst. Tragically, Tammy's mother passed away in 1998, without ever knowing her daughter's fate. Meanwhile, in November 1979, over 1,000 miles away in Caledonia, New York, a farmer made a grim discovery. While walking through his cornfield, he spotted a red piece of clothing. Investigating further, he found the lifeless body of a young woman. Authorities determined that she had been shot and her pockets had been emptied. With no identification and little evidence due to heavy rains, she became known as Caledonia Jane Doe, or Callie Doe. For decades, investigators pursued more than 10,000 leads, but none identified the young woman. A keychain found near her remains, sold in vending machines along the New York State Thruway, hinted at her journey. Witnesses recalled seeing her with an unidentified man at a diner, but even a composite sketch failed to crack the case. Carl Koppelman, a moderator on the Web Sleuths forum. In 2010, Carl completed a detailed facial reconstruction of Callie Doe, giving her a face for the first time in decades. 4 years later, he came across Tammy Joe Alexander's missing person case and noticed striking similarities. Tammy's history of running away and her last known movements seemed to align with the circumstances of Callie Doe. Carl reached out to authorities, and in 2015, DNA testing confirmed what he suspected. Callie Doe was Tammy Joe Alexander. At long last, Tammy's family had answers. Her disappearance wasn't a choice to start a new life, but a tragedy that had left her unidentified for over 35 years. Despite solving Tammy's identity, her case remains unfinished. Who was the man seen with her at the diner? Was he responsible for her death? Investigators and Tammy's loved ones continue to seek justice. Donnie Lwin. The pain of not knowing what happened to a missing loved one is an unimaginable burden. But for one family, that question was finally answered after a decade of searching. The disappearance of 59-year-old Navy veteran Donnie Lwin from Camdenton, Missouri, in 2013 left his family in a state of anguish until an unexpected hero emerged in the form of a determined YouTuber. On the morning of December 29, 2013, Donnie woke his wife around 6 a.m., asking for a gift card they'd received. He told her he wanted to use it to buy cigarettes from a gas station just 5 miles away. She gave him the card and, still groggy, went back to sleep. Hours later, she woke up to find Donnie still not home. Alarmed, she contacted the police and a family friend, Mindy Salz. Police reviewed CCTV footage of the route to the gas station, but found no trace of Donnie. It became clear that he had never made it there. With no additional clues, theories emerged suggesting he may have ended up in one of the Ozark lakes. His family hired divers to search the waters for over 4 years, but no signs of Donnie or his car were ever found. Complicating matters, Donnie had been dealing with PTSD and other mental health issues. While some wondered if this had played a role in his disappearance, the case remained cold for nearly a decade. Then, in 2022, James Hinkle, a YouTuber with experience as a firefighter, rescue scuba diver, and drone operator, decided to investigate. Living near the area where Donnie disappeared, Hinkle felt drawn to the case. For months, he searched the Ozarks and surrounding areas using his kayak, diving equipment, and drone, documenting his efforts on his YouTube channel. Finally, in December 2023, Hinkle's persistence paid off. While flying his drone over a pond near Donnie's home, he spotted the silhouette of a car submerged beneath the water. He immediately contacted the police, who recovered the vehicle, a Hyundai Elantra. Inside were human remains, along with an artificial hip that matched Donnie's medical records. It was confirmed that Donnie Lwin's disappearance had been solved. The news brought bittersweet relief to Donnie's family. For the first time in 10 years, they had answers and the closure they had long sought. "It was the best Christmas we've ever had," his family shared, grateful for the resolution. While investigators aren't sure how Donnie's car ended up in the pond, they don't suspect foul play. It's believed he may have lost control of his vehicle, leading to the tragic accident. Hinkle, elated to have helped bring peace to Donnie's loved ones, stated he plans to continue working on other missing person cases in Missouri. Maureen Teresa Sherman. For nearly 40 years, Maureen Teresa Sherman's family lived with unanswered questions about her disappearance. On May 1, 1985, the 47-year-old left her home in Cammon, Missouri, driving a red Plymouth Reliant K station wagon. She had been struggling with her mental health, and her family feared the worst when she didn't return. Despite searches and investigations, no trace of Maureen or her vehicle was ever found, and her case eventually went cold. What happened to Maureen? Would her case remain unsolved forever? In January 2024, the decades-old mystery caught the attention of two volunteer dive teams, Sunshine State Sonar and Adventures with Purpose. Both teams are known for their dedication to solving cold cases involving missing persons, often searching lakes, rivers, and canals for submerged vehicles. Their mission has brought answers to many families, and they were determined to do the same for Maureen's loved ones. The case also gained traction on YouTube, where both teams regularly share their search efforts and solutions, raising awareness and gathering support from the online community. So how did they find Maureen's car after all these years? On January 5, 2024, the teams began searching a canal near Maureen's home. After just 6 hours, they discovered a car submerged in the murky water. The vehicle resembled Maureen's red Plymouth, and when divers examined it more closely, they noticed the windows were down. It seemed likely that the driver had been unable to escape. Could social media and YouTube really help solve a case like this? The police were contacted, and the vehicle was pulled from the canal. Investigators identified it as Maureen's car by cross-referencing part of the license plate and other evidence. Human remains were also found inside, and it was confirmed that Maureen had finally been found. After nearly 4 decades, her family received the closure they had been longing for. And how did this bring closure for Maureen's family? The same weekend, Sunshine State Sonar and Adventures with Purpose located 3 additional missing persons, solving 5 cases in just 6 days. Their work, along with the awareness raised on platforms like YouTube, has become a beacon of hope for families of the missing, showing that even the coldest cases can be solved with persistence and innovation. Tara Grinstead. What happens when a beloved teacher and former beauty queen vanishes without a trace? The disappearance of Tara Grinstead shook her small Georgia town and baffled investigators for over a decade, until a podcast and a community of listeners helped crack the case. Tara grew up in Hawkinsville, Georgia, with her best friend Maria Woods, who fondly recalls her as someone who could brighten anyone's day. Ambitious and charismatic, Tara competed in beauty pageants to fund her education, eventually winning the Miss Tifton pageant in 1999 and competing in Miss Georgia that same year. Though she didn't win the state crown, she achieved her goal of making it that far. After retiring from pageants, Tara began mentoring young hopefuls, sharing her expertise in interviews, makeup, and stage presence. By 2005, she was 30 years old, working as a history teacher and cheerleading coach at Irwin County High School while attending night school to earn a specialist degree in education. Her dream was to become a school administrator or principal. But everything changed in October 2005. On Monday, October 24th, Tara failed to show up for her classes, something completely out of character. Concerned, the school contacted her friends and neighbors, but no one had seen her. The police were called to her home, where they found unsettling signs. Her bed was unmade, a bedside lamp was shattered, and in her front yard they discovered a single latex glove. DNA testing revealed the glove contained both Tara's DNA and that of an unidentified man. However, there were no matches in the database, and with no further leads, the case went cold. Years later, the case gained renewed attention thanks to Payne Lindsay's podcast, Up and Vanished. With a massive following, the podcast spotlighted Tara's disappearance, examining every clue and detail. This fresh attention caught the eye of Maurice Godwin, a private investigator hired by Tara's family. Together they re-examined the case, and new leads began to emerge. In 2017, Georgia police arrested Ryan Duke, a former student of Tara's, and a week later, Bo Dukes, no relation to Ryan. Investigators revealed a chilling confession. Ryan admitted to breaking into Tara's home, where she caught him in the act. He ended her life and then confided in Bo, who helped him dispose of her body on a nearby farm. The break in the case came after Bo's girlfriend, Brooke Sheridan, contacted authorities. She revealed that Bo had confessed his role to her, spurred by the growing media attention. Georgia Bureau of Investigation agent J.T. Ricketson later credited the podcast and media coverage for bringing the case to light. Ryan Duke was acquitted of murder charges, but was sentenced to 10 years in prison for concealing Tara's body. Bo Dukes received a 25-year sentence for his role in the cover-up. Tara Grinstead's case shows the power of persistence and public awareness in solving cold cases. Crystal Fald. 2 men, a quiet day in the woods, and a decision that would lead them to a nightmare. What could possibly be burning deep in the forest? What they found was horrifying. A fire intentionally set to destroy evidence of an unthinkable crime. On October 29, 2006, in Kilgore, Texas, 2 men were target shooting when they noticed a fire deeper in the woods. Curiosity led them to investigate, but nothing could prepare them for the discovery they made. A fire had been carefully set using wood and gasoline. Nearby, they found a gas can lid, and inside the fire was a body. Shocked, they immediately called the authorities. Who was the victim? Investigators found a woman's remains but had no way to identify her. She was believed to be in her early 20s, around 5 feet 4, and weighing about 110 pounds. Her teeth were perfect, suggesting she came from a middle-class family. Among the ashes, they found $40 in her jeans pocket and a purple sweater, but neither provided a clue to who she was. Why was she killed, and who was responsible? Detectives believed the fire was started just minutes before the men stumbled upon it. Evidence, including biological material, was preserved in hopes of identifying her killer. Residents in the area reported seeing suspicious people earlier that day, but couldn't describe anyone specific. With no strong leads, the case went cold. Could DNA solve the mystery? Her DNA was entered into databases, but no matches came back. A facial reconstruction gave investigators an idea of what she might have looked like, but it wasn't enough to identify her. For years, her identity remained a mystery, and she was known only as Lavender Doe. That is, until the case caught the attention of an internet sleuth named Kevin Lord. Why did he get involved? Kevin was passionate about solving cases involving unidentified victims. He contacted Lieutenant Eddie Hope, one of the investigators, and suggested they work with the DNA Doe Project, a group specializing in using genealogy to identify unknown victims. How did genealogy help? With money raised through crowdfunding, the team reanalyzed her DNA. By building a family tree, they eventually traced Lavender Doe's distant relatives. After 12 long years, she was finally identified as Dana Lynn Todd. Her family was devastated to learn her fate, but grateful to finally know what happened to her. Who was responsible for Dana's death? Joseph Wayne Barnett confessed to ending her life, as well as the life of his ex-girlfriend, Felicia Pearson, in 2018. He claimed he met Dana at a Walmart where she was selling magazine subscriptions. After convincing her to get into his car, he alleged that she stole some of his money. His reaction? He decided to take her life. Barnett pleaded guilty to both murders and was sentenced to 100 years in prison. It shows the incredible impact of combining technology, community efforts, and determination. Without internet sleuths like Kevin Lord and organizations like the DNA Doe Project, Dana might have remained unnamed and her family might never have had answers. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more compelling stories.